"I'll protect you," the mafia boss whispered. "Don't be afraid. You think you can hide her from me?" Marcus's furious voice exploded outside the car window. His fist slammed against the tinted glass. "She belongs to me. Open the door before this becomes your problem. Please, don't let him take me." Nina whispered immediately, her voice shaking as she pressed herself against the floor behind the front seat. "I won't cause trouble. I just need him to leave. Please." The man sitting above her did not respond right away. His presence filled the back seat with a calm that felt strangely heavier than Marcus's shouting. His charcoal suit remained perfectly composed, as though chaos rarely reached him. His eyes studied Nina without judgment, without pity, simply observing. Outside, Marcus circled the car like a predator who had lost sight of wounded prey. "Nina," he shouted again, "you really think anyone else would ever want you? After everything I've tolerated? After everything I paid for?" Nina flinched, her fingers tightening into fists. "I didn't know where else to go," she said quickly, barely breathing. "He thinks I owe him. He thinks I'm something he can trade." Marcus struck the window again, louder. "You signed up for this," he yelled. "You live under my roof. You follow my rules. That's how the world works." The man leaned slightly forward, resting one hand calmly against his knee. "You ran," he said quietly to Nina. "Yes," she answered, swallowing hard. "You knew he would follow. He always does." Marcus pressed his face closer to the glass, trying to see through the tint. "Whoever you are," Marcus shouted, his voice rising with desperation, "you don't want to get involved in this. She's part of a debt that needs to be settled." Nina's breath caught. "I'm not a debt," she whispered. Marcus laughed bitterly outside. "You became one the moment you decided to depend on me," he snapped. "You don't get to walk away from what you owe." The man's gaze sharpened almost imperceptibly. "She is not speaking to you," he said calmly, his voice barely above a whisper yet carrying undeniable authority. Marcus froze briefly, surprised someone inside the vehicle had responded. "Then listen carefully," Marcus snapped back. "You don't know what you're interfering with. That girl is collateral. She goes where I say she goes." Nina's voice trembled as she forced herself to speak. "If I go back with him, I won't come back at all." Silence settled inside the car for a brief moment. The man studied her expression, measuring the fear she was no longer able to hide. Marcus slammed his palm against the window again. "Stop pretending you care about her," he said harshly. "Nobody cares about her. That's why she's still with me." The man finally moved, his hand resting lightly on Nina's trembling shoulder. The gesture was controlled, steady, grounding. "Stay down," he said quietly. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. "He will never touch you again." The words seemed to alter the air itself. Marcus's expression twisted with anger as the engine began to respond. "You don't know who you're dealing with," Marcus shouted, stepping back as the car began to roll forward. "You think money makes you untouchable? Everyone has a weakness." The sedan moved smoothly past him. Marcus's voice faded behind them. "This isn't over," he yelled, the sound echoing through the concrete structure. "You hear me, Nina? You still belong to me." Nina squeezed her eyes shut as the garage exit approached. The harsh fluorescent lights gave way to the muted glow of evening outside. Her breathing came unevenly as the car merged into traffic. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Finally, she slowly pushed herself upright from the floor, careful to remain small, careful not to intrude. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't mean to involve you." "You didn't," the man replied. "You don't even know me." "No. Then why help me?" The city lights reflected faintly across the car's interior as Lakeshore Drive stretched ahead. "Because he spoke of you as property," the man answered calmly. Nina looked down at her hands. "That happens more often than people admit," he added. She hesitated. "My name is Nina," she said quietly. "I work at the Langford Grand. Housekeeping." "I am aware of the hotel," he replied. "I didn't plan this," she continued. "I just ran." "You chose movement instead of surrender," he said. "That decision has saved many people." She studied his face cautiously. "You're not worried he'll come after you?" "I rarely concern myself with men who confuse control with power," he answered evenly. The certainty in his voice steadied her breathing more than reassurance ever had. "Is he going to find me?" she asked carefully. "No." The answer came without hesitation. They drove in silence for several minutes, the Chicago skyline rising ahead, glass towers reflecting the fading light of sunset. Behind them, Marcus's voice had disappeared into irrelevance. Nina clasped her hands tightly together, feeling the tremor slowly leave her fingers. "I didn't run because I'm brave," she admitted quietly. "Most people don't," the man replied. "I ran because I finally realized staying was going to cost more than leaving." A faint pause followed. "That realization," he said calmly, "changes everything." Nina looked out the window as the city lights shimmered across the surface of the lake. The black sedan moved through Chicago's evening traffic with quiet authority, gliding past lines of headlights and impatient drivers as though the city instinctively made space for it. Nina sat still, hands folded tightly in her lap, unsure where to rest her eyes. The silence inside the car did not feel awkward, but it carried a quiet gravity she did not yet understand. Streetlights cast soft reflections across the window as Lake Shore Drive curved alongside the dark waters of Lake Michigan. The city skyline shimmered in the distance, tall buildings glowing in shades of amber and steel blue. Nina had seen this view before while riding the bus home after long shifts, but never like this. Never from inside a car that felt insulated from the noise of ordinary life. She became aware that her breathing had finally slowed. The man beside her remained composed, his posture straight but unforced, his gaze focused forward as if nothing unusual had occurred. If helping a terrified stranger escape an angry pursuer had disrupted his evening, he gave no indication. After several minutes, the car turned into a quiet street lined with historic stone buildings. The architecture shifted from commercial glass towers to older residences with carved facades and iron balconies. Wealth here was not loud, it was established. The sedan descended into a private underground entrance illuminated by soft recessed lighting. The security gate opened before the car even came to a complete stop, as if its arrival had already been anticipated. Nina's stomach tightened. Where am I? The car rolled into a spotless parking area, where polished concrete floors reflected the vehicle's dark silhouette. Another car door opened somewhere nearby, followed by quiet footsteps. Nina instinctively stiffened. The man beside her spoke calmly. "You are safe here." The words were not offered as comfort. They sounded more like a fact. The rear door opened smoothly, and cool evening air drifted inside. Nina hesitated before stepping out. Her legs felt unsteady after the rush of adrenaline had faded. She smoothed the wrinkles from her housekeeping uniform automatically, embarrassed by its simplicity and surroundings that seemed designed for people who never worried about price tags. Two men stood a respectful distance away near a private elevator. Both wore dark suits. Both maintained neutral expressions. Both gave the impression that very little escaped their awareness. Neither looked surprised to see Nina. The man from the car stepped forward, and the subtle shift in atmosphere made it clear he was the reason the others were present. "This way," he said. His voice remained calm, measured, unhurried. Nina followed, uncertain but unable to ignore the quiet confidence that seemed to shape the environment around him. The elevator doors opened immediately, revealing an interior lined with polished wood panels and soft lighting. No buttons were pressed. The elevator began ascending smoothly the moment the doors closed. She glanced at her reflection in the mirrored wall. Loose strands of pale brown hair had escaped her bun during the frantic escape. Her uniform was wrinkled, her eyes slightly swollen from stress she had not yet processed. She looked like someone who had accidentally wandered into a world where she did not belong. "You may sit if you feel unsteady," the man said without looking directly at her. "I'm fine," Nina replied quickly. Though her fingers tightened together, the elevator stopped after several seconds that felt longer than they were. The doors opened into a spacious interior filled with warm lamplight and quiet order. The space felt lived in but meticulously maintained. Walnut floors stretched across the room, softened by understated rugs. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with hardbound volumes that looked carefully selected rather than decorative. A faint scent of cedar and aged paper lingered in the air. Nina stepped inside cautiously. This is someone's home, not an office, not a hotel suite, a home. The man removed his suit jacket and placed it neatly across the back of a chair before turning to face her fully for the first time. "I assume you have not eaten," he said. The question caught her off guard. "I had a sandwich earlier," she answered automatically. "You are hungry." It was not a question. Nina hesitated, embarrassed by how easily he had read what she had not admitted. "Yes," she said quietly. He nodded once and crossed the room toward a kitchen area that blended seamlessly into the open living space. His movements were efficient, practiced, as though he had repeated similar routines countless times. He returned with a glass of water and placed it carefully on the table within her reach. "You are not required to explain anything tonight," he said. Nina accepted the glass with both hands, surprised by the simple kindness of the gesture. "Thank you." She drank slowly, realizing how dry her throat had become. "What happens now?" she asked carefully. "For tonight," he replied, "you rest. And tomorrow? Tomorrow depends on what you decide." His answer unsettled her slightly. "You're giving me a choice?" "Yes." She studied his expression, searching for signs of expectation or hidden obligation. "Most people who help someone like me expect something in return," she admitted. His gaze remained steady. "I do not collect people as favors." The clarity in his voice left little room for misunderstanding. Nina lowered her eyes briefly. "I don't want to cause problems for you." "You are not causing a problem," he said calmly. "What if he comes looking? If he does, he will not find you." The certainty in his tone echoed the confidence she had heard earlier in the car. She nodded slowly, unsure why she believed him. "What is your name?" she asked. "Victor Hale." The name carried weight, though she could not immediately explain why. "I'm Nina Carter." "I am aware." "You knew? You entered my vehicle in a location where identities are rarely unknown." The realization made her slightly self-conscious. "I didn't mean to intrude." "You did not intrude," Victor replied. "You sought protection." She hesitated. Protection usually comes with rules. Victor considered that for a moment. "There are only two rules here," he said. "You are not harmed, and you are not owned." If Nina's quiet courage touched something in you, tell us how this moment made you feel and where in the world you are listening from. And if you understand what it means to search for safety, dignity, and a second chance, please don't hesitate to like and subscribe to support stories that remind us compassion still exists. Your support helps these stories reach those who may need hope tonight. The words settled into the quiet room. Emotion rose unexpectedly in her chest, tight and unfamiliar. "I don't remember the last time someone said something like that to me," she admitted softly. Victor did not respond immediately. Instead, he gestured toward a hallway extending deeper into the residence. "There is a guest room prepared," he said. "You may use anything you need." Prepared. The word suggested this was not the first time Victor had provided refuge to someone in crisis. Nina stood slowly. "I don't know how to repay this," she said. "You do not repay safety," Victor replied. "You use it." She absorbed the statement silently. Before stepping toward the hallway, she paused. "Why help me?" she asked again. Victor's expression remained composed. "Because the man in the garage believed fear gave him authority," he said. "I disagree." His answer offered no further explanation, yet something about it felt complete. Nina nodded and moved down the hallway, each step carrying her further away from the version of her life she had left behind only hours earlier. Inside the guest room, soft lighting illuminated neutral walls and carefully chosen furnishings. A folded set of simple clothing rested on the bed. Nothing extravagant. Nothing overwhelming. Just thoughtful. She closed the door gently and sat at the edge of the mattress. For the first time since discovering Marcus's plan, her body allowed itself to register exhaustion. Her hands trembled slightly as she pressed her palms together, grounding herself in the unfamiliar quiet. Fear had not disappeared, but something else had joined it. Hope was too strong a word. Trust was too early, but possibility remained. And possibility, she realized, was enough for tonight. Morning arrived quietly over Chicago, pale light filtering through the tall windows of Victor Hale's penthouse and settling across the hardwood floor in long, muted lines. Nina woke slowly. Her body stiff from tension she had carried for years, but only now allowed to loosen. For several seconds, she did not remember where she was. The unfamiliar softness of the bed, the faint scent of cedar in the air, the absence of noise pressing against her nerves, everything felt distant from the life she had left behind only hours earlier. Then memory returned. The garage, Marcus, the black sedan, the voice that had spoken 4 words with quiet certainty. "I'll protect you." Nina sat up, her bare feet touching the cool wooden floor. The guest room was elegant without being excessive, designed for comfort rather than display. The folded clothes she had noticed the night before remained placed neatly at the foot of the bed. Dark jeans, a soft cream sweater, and a pair of simple leather flats. No logos. No unnecessary decoration, Just quality. She hesitated before touching the fabric, unused to wearing anything that felt intentionally chosen. After showering, she stood before the mirror longer than she expected. Without the stiff housekeeping uniform, she looked younger, though the shadows beneath her eyes revealed years of quiet endurance. She brushed her hair slowly, unsure why such an ordinary act felt unfamiliar. When she finally stepped into the main living space, Victor was already awake. He sat near the large window overlooking the city, a newspaper folded neatly on the table beside him. Morning light outlined his profile, revealing faint lines near his eyes that suggested experience rather than age. A cup of black coffee rested near his hand, untouched for the moment. He looked up briefly as Nina entered. "You slept," he observed. "Yes," she replied. "That is good." The simplicity of the exchange eased some of the tension in her shoulders. "I hope I didn't inconvenience your routine," she said. "My routine adjusts when necessary." He gestured toward the kitchen island where another cup of coffee waited. "You should eat," he added. Nina approached cautiously. A plate containing eggs, toast, and sliced fruit sat beside the coffee. The presentation was modest but deliberate, far removed from the hurried meals she usually ate standing beside the kitchen sink in her apartment. "You didn't have to do this," she said quietly. Victor folded the newspaper calmly. "Nutrition is not a luxury," he replied. "It is maintenance." She allowed herself a small nod before sitting. For several minutes, the only sound in the room was the soft clink of silverware and the distant hum of morning traffic rising from the street below. Nina studied the skyline beyond the windows. Chicago looked different from this height. The noise seemed distant, the movement slower. "I should return to work," she said eventually. "If I don't show up, they'll assume something is wrong." Victor considered her words. "Your employer has already been notified that you are on leave." Her fork paused midair. "You contacted them?" "Yes." "How?" "The same way most matters are handled." She lowered the fork slowly. "I didn't ask you to do that." "No," Victor agreed. "You did not." A flicker of uncertainty crossed her expression. "I can't afford to lose that job," she said. "You have not lost it?" "How can you be sure?" Victor took a measured sip of coffee before answering. "Stability is easier to maintain than to rebuild." The response felt deliberately neutral, offering reassurance without explanation. Nina looked down at her plate. "I've spent years trying not to need help," she admitted quietly. "Need is not weakness," Victor said. "Dependence without choice is." The distinction lingered in her thoughts. After breakfast, Victor stood and retrieved his jacket from the back of a chair. "There is somewhere we will go today," he said. Nina looked up, surprised. "Way?" "Yes." Her instinctive reaction was hesitation. "I don't think I'm ready to be seen in places like this," she admitted. "You are ready to exist," Victor replied calmly. "That is sufficient." She hesitated again. "I don't own anything appropriate." Victor's gaze remained steady. "You now do." A faint unease returned. "I don't want to become something I don't recognize." Victor adjusted the cuff of his shirt thoughtfully. "Clothing does not change identity," he said. "It reveals whether identity has been suppressed." The statement unsettled her, not because she disagreed, but because she was unsure how much of herself had been hidden simply to avoid conflict. The car ride that followed was quieter than the previous night's escape. Daylight revealed more of the city's character, tree-lined streets, historic architecture, pedestrians carrying coffee cups on their way to work. Life continued normally. Unaware of how drastically Nina's own circumstances had shifted, they arrived at Oak Street, where boutique storefronts displayed carefully arranged collections behind pristine glass windows. The district radiated understated wealth, the kind built over generations rather than acquired quickly. Nina instinctively slowed her steps. "I don't belong here," she murmured. Victor did not stop walking. "Belonging is rarely granted by location," he said. "It is decided internally." Inside the boutique, soft music played quietly beneath the muted conversations of early shoppers. The air carried the faint scent of polished wood and subtle perfume. Everything appeared curated. A young sales associate approached, her smile polite but measured. Her eyes moved briefly across Nina's simple clothing before returning to Victor with renewed attention. "Good morning," she said. "How may we assist you today?" Victor gestured calmly toward Nina. "She will choose what she requires." The associate's smile faltered almost imperceptibly. "We specialize in tailored pieces," she replied carefully. "Our sizing is limited." The implication hung in the air, Nina lowered her gaze slightly, accustomed to the quiet dismissal. "It's all right," she said quickly. "We can go somewhere else." Victor remained still. "No," he said evenly. The associate shifted uncomfortably. "I apologize if there has been a misunderstanding," she said, her tone becoming more formal. "There has been no misunderstanding," Victor replied calmly. "You will bring every available piece that fits her measurements." The firmness in his voice left little room for negotiation. Moments later, additional staff appeared, carrying garments from various displays. Nina felt heat rise in her cheeks. "You don't need to do this," she whispered. Victor's expression did not change. "I do not tolerate disrespect disguised as policy," he said quietly. The fitting process began slowly, uncertainty giving way to curiosity. Fabrics softer than anything Nina had worn before, draped naturally across her shoulders. Colors she would never have considered reflected subtly in the mirror. When she stepped out wearing a navy cashmere sweater and tailored trousers, the associate's expression shifted. Victor studied her reflection calmly. "You see?" he said. Nina hesitated. "I look different." "No," Victor replied. "You look unhidden." The words struck deeper than she expected. For the first time in years, Nina did not immediately search for flaws in the mirror. She saw posture instead of insecurity, presence instead of apology. Perhaps dignity had not disappeared after all. Perhaps it had simply been waiting for permission to return. As they left the boutique, the crisp autumn air felt sharper, clearer. Victor handed her a neatly wrapped package. "Respect," he said calmly, "is not requested. It is established." Nina held the package carefully. The world had not changed overnight, but something inside her had begun to shift. And once dignity awakens, it rarely returns quietly to sleep. Late afternoon light filtered through the tall windows of Victor Hale's penthouse library, casting long shadows across shelves filled with leather-bound books and carefully labeled files. Nina moved slowly along the polished wood floor, her fingertips brushing lightly against the spines as though afraid she might disturb something fragile. The room smelled faintly of cedar and old paper, a quiet contrast to the noise that usually filled her thoughts. Victor had left earlier that morning, offering no explanation beyond a simple assurance that she should feel free to move about the apartment as she wished. No restrictions had been mentioned, no boundaries outlined beyond the obvious expectation of respect. The absence of control unsettled her more than rules ever had. Freedom, she was discovering, required adjustment. She paused near a wide desk positioned beneath a window overlooking the city. The skyline appeared calm from this height, distant traffic resembling a slow, orderly pattern rather than chaos. Chicago looked almost peaceful. Her eyes moved across the desk's surface. Documents were stacked neatly in precise alignment. A fountain pen rested parallel to the edge of a leather notebook. Everything suggested discipline. She had always found comfort in order. Cleaning hotel rooms had never bothered her the way guests assumed it would. Order meant predictability. Predictability meant safety. Without fully deciding to do so, she began straightening a small stack of papers that had shifted slightly from their alignment. One folder slipped free and fell softly to the floor. Nina bent instinctively to pick it up. The label caught her attention immediately. M. Hale Debt Transfer Agreement. Her stomach tightened. Hale. Marcus Hale. The coincidence felt impossible. Her fingers hesitated above the folder before she opened it. Inside, typed documents outlined financial transactions she did not fully understand. Legal language referenced asset recovery, settlement transfers, and acquisition rights. Names of companies she had never heard of appeared repeatedly. Several pages bore the same symbol embossed in dark red ink, a lotus flower encircled by a chain. Her pulse began to quicken. The final page carried a signature written in firm, precise handwriting. Victor Hale. The date matched the night she had fled Marcus. Nina lowered herself slowly into the chair behind the desk, the air in the room suddenly feeling heavier. He didn't just help me. He purchased the debt. Her thoughts struggled to organize themselves as realization unfolded piece by piece. Marcus had not simply lost control of her. Victor had taken legal control away from him. The distinction should have reassured her. Instead, uncertainty crept quietly into her chest. Had she escaped ownership, or merely changed hands? She closed the folder carefully, her fingers trembling despite her effort to remain calm. A quiet sound at the doorway made her look up. A woman stood there, poised, composed, dressed in a charcoal suit tailored with the same understated precision Nina had begun to associate with Victor's world. Her dark hair was pulled into a sleek knot, her posture conveying effortless authority. "You have excellent timing," the woman said coolly. Nina rose immediately. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to intrude." "You didn't intrude," the woman replied, stepping further into the room. "You discovered something inevitable." Her eyes moved briefly to the folder on the desk. "Most people take longer." Nina swallowed carefully. "I wasn't looking for anything." "No one ever is," the woman replied. There was no warmth in her tone, but no open hostility either. Only evaluation. "I'm Elena Voss," the woman continued, "Director of Operations." Nina nodded politely. "I didn't realize the file involved me." Elena allowed a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Everything in this building involves you now." The statement unsettled her. "I didn't ask to be involved in anything." "Of course not," Elena said smoothly. "No one ever asks to become leverage." Nina's gaze sharpened. "I'm not leverage." Elena tilted her head slightly. "Then what are you?" Nina hesitated. "I don't know yet." Elena studied her carefully before speaking again. "Victor does not make impulsive decisions," she said. "He does not intervene in situations without strategic value." "I didn't ask him to intervene." "No," Elena agreed. "You asked him not to open a car door." The memory tightened Nina's chest. "What does that have to do with a debt transfer?" she asked quietly. Elena approached the desk, resting one hand lightly on its polished surface. "The Crimson Lotus organization extended credit to Marcus Hale," she explained. "When repayment became unlikely, alternative assets were considered." Nina's jaw tightened. "I am not an asset." "You were treated as one," Elena corrected calmly. "Victor eliminated that arrangement. By purchasing it." "Yes." Silence settled briefly. Nina folded her arms lightly, grounding herself. "So now I owe him?" Elena's expression remained composed. "That depends on how you define debt." The answer did not reassure her. "I didn't agree to belong to anyone," Nina said firmly. Elena's eyes sharpened slightly. "Victor is not interested in ownership," she said. "He is interested in control of outcomes." "That sounds similar." "It is not." Before Nina could respond, a familiar voice spoke from the doorway. "It is very different." Victor entered the room without raising his voice, yet the shift in atmosphere was immediate. Elena stepped aside slightly, allowing him clear access to the desk. Nina's pulse quickened. "I didn't mean to go through your things," she said quickly. Victor looked at the closed folder, then back at her. "Truth does not become less true because it is discovered early," he replied calmly. "You bought the debt," Nina said. "Yes." "Why?" Victor considered the question briefly. "Because another party intended to use fear as leverage," he said. "That doesn't explain why you involved me. You were already involved." "I didn't choose that." "No," he agreed. "You did not." Nina took a steady breath. "Am I free to leave?" Victor's expression did not change. "You were always free to leave." Her eyes searched his face. "Even now?" "Yes." "And the debt?" Victor opened the folder, removed the final page, and held it briefly over the small lighter resting beside the pen. The paper caught flame slowly, edges curling inward as heat consumed the printed ink. Nina watched in silence as the document turned to ash. "No one owns you," Victor said quietly. The simplicity of the statement left no room for interpretation. Elena observed without comment. "What happens now?" Nina asked softly. Victor placed the remaining ashes into a metal tray. "Now," he said calmly, "you decide who you become without permission." The answer carried weight she did not yet fully understand. Elena turned toward the doorway. "I will adjust the schedule," she said. Victor nodded once. After she left, Nina remained still, absorbing the quiet certainty of the moment. "I don't understand why you would do this for someone you just met," she admitted. Victor closed the folder gently. "Power," he said, "is most valuable when it prevents harm before harm becomes irreversible." She studied him carefully. "And what do you expect from me?" "Honesty," he replied. "Nothing more." The request felt almost unfamiliar. "I don't know what my life looks like without survival being the priority," she admitted. "Then you will learn." Nina exhaled slowly. Outside the window, the city continued its steady rhythm, unaware that something invisible had shifted inside the quiet library. The chain Marcus believed he had placed around her future no longer existed. But freedom, she realized, came with its own unfamiliar weight. For the first time, her life was no longer defined by what she needed to escape. Now she would have to decide what she was willing to become. And that decision, she sensed, would change more than her own future. Victor did not mention the burned document again that evening. Whatever decision he had made in the library seemed complete in his mind, requiring no further explanation. Nina sensed that pressing the subject would not change anything. The ashes of the contract were gone, but the meaning of the gesture remained suspended in the quiet air between them. Chicago darkened outside the tall windows, the city lights flickering alive one building at a time. From this height, traffic resembled thin ribbons of red and white threading through the grid of streets. Nina stood near the window, arms folded loosely, her reflection faintly visible against the glass. "You removed the legal claim," she said quietly, not turning around. "Yes. That doesn't remove the danger." "No," Victor agreed. She faced him. "The people Marcus owed money to, they won't simply forget." "They will not," Victor said calmly. "Then why destroy the leverage?" Victor rested one hand against the back of a chair, considering her question as though it deserved precision. "Leverage implies obligation," he said. "You do not owe me compliance." Nina studied his expression carefully. "Most people with power don't eliminate advantage. Most people misunderstand power," Victor replied. The answer unsettled her in a way she could not immediately explain. She moved toward the kitchen slowly, needing the grounding comfort of simple motion. She poured water into a glass, the quiet sound filling the pause between them. "I don't know how to exist in this kind of situation," she admitted. "Every decision I've made for years has been about avoiding conflict." "That is common," Victor said. "Not healthy." "No," he agreed. She exhaled softly. "If those people believe I still have value to them, they may come looking." "They may," Victor said. "You don't sound concerned." "I am attentive," he corrected. Nina leaned lightly against the counter. "There is a difference?" "A significant one." He walked toward the window, his reflection briefly overlapping with hers in the glass. "Concern creates hesitation," he said. "Attention creates preparation." The distinction felt deliberate. "You believe something is coming," she said. "I believe actions have consequences. And helping me created consequences." "Yes." The simplicity of his honesty surprised her. "You speak about risk as if it's routine," she said. "For me it is. For me, it isn't." Victor turned slightly, his gaze steady. "You are no longer alone in facing it." The reassurance felt unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable in its steadiness. Nina looked down at the glass in her hands. "I'm not accustomed to relying on anyone." "Reliance is not required," Victor said. "Only clarity." She hesitated. "What happens when the people Marcus owed decide they want compensation?" "They will communicate." "And then?" Victor's voice remained calm. "Then we respond." "Way." The word lingered. "You include me in that response?" she asked carefully. "You are already included. I don't have experience in this world." "Experience is acquired." "You say that as if I applied for a position." Victor allowed the faintest hint of dry humor to touch his expression. "Most important roles are never applied for." Nina almost smiled, then stopped herself. "I'm serious." "So when He stepped closer, not invading her space but making his presence clear. "You survived 4 years in an environment designed to diminish you," he said. "You adapted, you observed, you endured. That doesn't qualify me for conflict with organized criminals. It qualifies you for recognizing patterns of behavior." She absorbed the statement silently. "I learned how to predict Marcus's moods," she admitted. "I learned when to speak and when silence was safer." "Pattern recognition," Victor said calmly. "An undervalued skill." Nina exhaled slowly. "I learned how to make myself smaller. That skill will no longer be necessary." The firmness in his voice surprised her. "You speak as if the situation is already resolved." "No," Victor said. "Only the direction is resolved." She studied him carefully. "You're certain those people won't try to use me again?" "They may try. And if they do?" Victor's tone did not change. "They will discover the terms have changed." A quiet confidence underlined the words. Nina placed the empty glass down gently. "I don't want anyone hurt because of me." Victor's expression remained composed. "People who create harm are responsible for the consequences that follow." She hesitated. "That sounds like justification." "It is accountability." The distinction settled heavily in the room. "Marcus always justified everything," Nina said quietly. "Every insult, every threat, every bruise. He always had a reason." Victor's gaze did not soften, but something in his tone shifted. "Control relies on convincing the victim that resistance is selfish," he said. "It is not." She folded her arms lightly. I still feel like I'm waiting for permission to exist. That feeling fades, he said, when evidence replaces fear. She looked toward the city lights again. I'm not sure I know how to recognize evidence yet. You will. Silence returned, but it no longer felt uncertain. After a moment, Victor spoke again. There will be a gathering tomorrow evening. Nina turned slightly. What kind of gathering? A formal charity event. She immediately shook her head. I can't attend something like that. You can. I wouldn't know how to behave. You behave as yourself. That has not always been acceptable. Victor regarded her steadily. That is no longer relevant. She hesitated. I don't belong in rooms filled with people who have influence. Victor's answer came without pause. Influence does not determine worth. She considered refusing again, but recognized the quiet persistence in his tone. What would be expected of me? Presence, he said. Nothing more. That rarely remains the expectation. No, Victor agreed. It does not. She exhaled slowly. You want them to see me? Yes. Why? Victor's gaze remained calm. Because secrecy invites speculation, he said. Clarity prevents manipulation. The logic made sense, even if the idea unsettled her. I'm not prepared to be judged. Judgment is inevitable, Victor replied. Its accuracy is optional. She studied him carefully. You speak about society as if you've already rejected its approval. I do not require approval, he said. The statement carried quiet certainty. Nina nodded slowly. If I agree to attend, I do so as myself. Correct. No expectations beyond that. Correct. She considered the implications carefully. Then I will attend, she said finally. Victor inclined his head once. Preparation will be arranged. As he turned to leave the room, Nina spoke again. You said earlier that power prevents harm when used correctly. Yes. Then what prevents power from becoming harm itself? Victor paused briefly before answering. Memory, he said. The single word lingered long after he left the room. Nina remained near the window, watching the city move beneath the quiet glow of evening lights. Her life had once been defined by avoiding attention. Now she was preparing to enter a room designed entirely around it. She did not yet know what role she would play in Victor Hale's world, but she understood something clearly for the first time. Survival had been her past. Choice was becoming her future. And choice, unlike survival, required courage of a different kind. The evening of the charity gala arrived with a quiet sense of inevitability. Chicago's skyline shimmered under a cold winter sky, each tower illuminated like a silent declaration of power and permanence. Inside Victor Hale's penthouse, the atmosphere felt calm, but beneath the calm lingered the awareness that the night ahead would introduce Nina to a world she had spent her entire life avoiding. She stood near the bedroom window, adjusting the sleeve of the deep emerald velvet dress that had been delivered earlier that afternoon. The fabric felt unfamiliar against her skin, structured yet soft, designed to hold shape without restricting movement. The high neckline and long sleeves provided comfort, allowing her to feel composed rather than exposed. She studied her reflection carefully. For years, mirrors had been instruments of criticism, tools Marcus used to reinforce his narrative that she was fortunate to receive any attention at all. Tonight, the reflection looking back at her did not appear smaller. She looked composed, alert, aware, not transformed, revealed. A soft knock sounded at the door. Come in, Nina said. Victor entered, dressed in a charcoal tuxedo tailored with the same understated precision she had come to associate with him. The crisp white shirt, dark tie, and polished shoes reflected quiet discipline rather than showmanship. He paused briefly when he saw her. You are prepared, he said simply. I feel like I'm attending someone else's life, she admitted. That feeling will pass. I'm not certain I want it to. Victor adjusted the cuff of his sleeve calmly. Discomfort is often evidence of growth, he said. She exhaled slowly. I don't know how people behave in rooms like this. You observe, he replied. Then you decide which behaviors deserve imitation. She nodded slightly. Is everyone attending, like you? No, Victor said. Many are far worse. The honesty surprised a small, reluctant smile from her. The drive to the gala took place under a sky streaked with low clouds reflecting the glow of city lights. Traffic moved steadily through downtown Chicago, past illuminated storefronts and restaurants filled with conversations that seemed far removed from the quiet tension building inside the car. The gala was held at the Adler Cultural Museum, a historic building overlooking the lake, known for hosting events attended by politicians, business leaders, and philanthropists whose influence shaped more than financial markets. Tall stone columns framed the entrance, where soft golden lighting welcomed arriving guests. The car came to a smooth stop near the entrance. Nina hesitated briefly before stepping out. Cold air brushed her face, grounding her in the present moment. Victor offered his arm without ceremony. "You are not entering alone," he said. She placed her hand lightly against his sleeve, aware of the steady confidence in his posture. Inside, the museum's grand hall shimmered with soft light reflecting off crystal chandeliers. Conversations blended into a low murmur of polite diplomacy and subtle competition. Waitstaff moved gracefully between small groups, offering champagne and carefully arranged hors d'oeuvres. Nina felt the shift immediately. Eyes noticed Victor. Then they noticed her. Some expressions revealed curiosity. Others revealed calculation. Victor did not slow his pace. "Keep your shoulders relaxed," he said quietly. "Confidence is rarely questioned when it appears natural. I'm not certain confidence feels natural yet." "Then let calm serve in its place." A middle-aged couple approached, offering polite greetings that carried undertones of respect rather than warmth. Victor responded with measured courtesy, introducing Nina simply by name, offering no explanation, no justification, no apology. The simplicity of the introduction carried unexpected power. Nina noticed the subtle reactions. Some guests attempted to conceal surprise. Others attempted to mask judgment. A few seemed intrigued by the absence of visible hierarchy between them. "She is not what they expected," Victor said quietly as they moved deeper into the room. "I'm not sure what they expected." "Predictability." She almost laughed softly. "I've rarely been described that way. That may prove advantageous." A server offered champagne. Nina accepted the glass but did not drink. Her awareness focused on the shifting energy of the room. Across the hall, she noticed a man watching Victor closely. His expression appeared pleasant, but his eyes remained alert. Measuring distance, posture, interaction. Nina leaned slightly closer. "The man near the balcony," she murmured. "Gray suit. He hasn't looked away since we entered." Victor did not immediately turn. "I am aware. You know him?" "Yes." "Is that good?" "No." She resisted the urge to look again. "What happens now?" "We continue the evening." "You speak as if tension is expected." "It is." A subtle shift in the room's rhythm caught her attention. Conversation slowed slightly, as if participants sensed something approaching without understanding what. The man near the balcony raised a glass in Victor's direction. Victor acknowledged the gesture briefly. "Crimson Lotus representation," he said quietly. The words settled coldly in Nina's chest. "They attend charity events?" "They attend influence." Nina's fingers tightened slightly around the stem of the champagne glass. "I didn't expect them to appear so ordinary. Danger rarely introduces itself dramatically." She watched the man's subtle movements as he spoke quietly with two others near the far wall. "He looks patient," she said. "He is calculating." She lowered her voice further. "If they wanted to threaten you, why do it here? Because public settings create controlled risk. And controlled witnesses." "Yes." The implication was clear. Suddenly, Nina noticed a small detail that unsettled her instincts. A waiter moved across the room, adjusting his path slightly as he approached Victor's position. The tray he carried remained steady, but his attention appeared divided. "That waiter," she murmured. Victor's posture did not change. "What about him?" "He's not looking where he's walking." Victor's gaze shifted subtly. The waiter's movement slowed. Nina's pulse quickened. "He's watching someone behind us," she whispered. Victor turned slightly, repositioning himself so that Nina remained shielded from the open center of the room. "Stay beside me," he said quietly. Nina's attention moved upward instinctively, scanning the second-level balcony where lighting equipment cast long shadows. A faint reflection caught her eye. A small red dot appeared briefly against the dark fabric of Victor's jacket. Her breath caught sharply. "Victor," she whispered urgently. He felt her grip tighten. "What is it?" "The balcony," she said quickly. "Don't move." The red dot hovered steadily near his chest. Time seemed to compress into a single fragile moment. "Step left," she said sharply, abandoning hesitation. Victor reacted instantly, shifting position as Nina moved with him. A sharp crack echoed through the hall. Glass shattered somewhere behind them as the sound ricocheted through the room. Screams erupted as guests ducked instinctively. Victor's arm moved firmly around Nina, guiding her toward a side exit with controlled urgency. His calm expression had not changed, but something colder now existed beneath it. "They have made their decision," he said quietly. Nina's heart pounded. "And now?" Victor's voice lowered almost to a whisper. "Now we respond." The sharp echo of the gunshot fractured the illusion of civility inside the grand hall. Glass shattered behind them, followed by the sudden collapse of polite conversation into chaos. Guests moved instinctively, some ducking behind marble columns, others frozen in disbelief, as security personnel rushed forward with controlled urgency. The orchestra's music had stopped mid-note, leaving only the echo of fear filling the high-ceilinged room. Victor's grip around Nina's arm remained firm but steady, guiding her toward a discreet service corridor partially hidden behind velvet drapery. He did not run. He did not panic. His pace remained measured, deliberate, as though every movement had already been considered long before the first shot had been fired. "Stay close," he said quietly. Nina nodded, her pulse hammering in her ears. "This was planned," she said under her breath. "Yes. You expected something like this." "I expected communication," Victor replied calmly. "This is one form of it." They moved through the corridor as security staff directed guests toward safer exits. The muted lighting of the hallway contrasted sharply with the glittering spectacle they had just left behind. Here, the atmosphere felt colder, more practical. "Are we safe?" Nina asked. For the moment, that answer did not comfort her. A door at the end of the corridor opened into a narrow stairwell leading downward toward the service level of the building. Victor paused briefly, listening, evaluating. "They will assume we use the main exits," he said. "So we don't." "Correct." They descended quickly, but without haste. Nina concentrated on steady breathing, forcing her mind to remain clear. Panic would not help either of them. "You saw the laser before I did," Victor said quietly as they reached the lower level. "I noticed movement patterns," she replied, surprised by how calm her voice sounded. "People reveal intent before action." Victor glanced briefly toward her. "You adapted quickly." "I survived by observing." They exited the stairwell into a loading area where catering vehicles had been parked earlier that evening. The large space smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals and cold metal. The distant sounds of sirens were already approaching the museum's main entrance, though it remained unclear whether authorities had been called or if the sound came from unrelated city activity. A dark SUV waited near the loading dock. The driver, a man Nina had not seen before, stepped forward immediately when Victor approached. "There was one shot," the driver said quietly. "No confirmed injuries." "Secondary team?" Victor asked. "In position." Victor nodded once. "We leave immediately." The rear door opened, and Nina entered quickly, aware that hesitation could cost valuable seconds. The vehicle pulled away smoothly from the loading dock, merging into traffic without drawing attention. The city continued its rhythm, unaware that violence had brushed briefly against its carefully maintained surface. Nina exhaled slowly as distance grew between them and the museum. "That wasn't meant to kill randomly," she said carefully. "No, it was meant to send a message." "Yes, and the message was directed at you." Victor's expression remained composed. "And at anyone associated with me." She absorbed the implication. "I am now associated with you," she said. "Yes." Silence lingered briefly. "You still believe I should have attended," she said. "Yes." "Even knowing this could happen?" "Especially knowing," Victor replied. Nina studied him carefully. "You wanted them to see me. I wanted them to understand that intimidation would not alter my decisions, and that includes helping me." "Yes." She considered the statement quietly. "You could have kept me hidden," she said. "That would have suggested vulnerability, and you refused to appear vulnerable." Victor's gaze shifted toward the passing lights outside. Vulnerability invites escalation. Nina leaned back slightly against the seat. "They will try again." "Yes. And next time may not be public." "Correct." The honesty did not frighten her as much as she expected. "What happens now?" she asked. "We adjust strategy." "I am part of that strategy." "Yes." She folded her hands together. "Then I want clarity." Victor gave a small nod. "Clarity is reasonable." "I will not be used as bait," she said firmly. "You are not bait. I need to hear you say that plainly." "You are not bait," he repeated calmly. "And I am not leverage." "You are not leverage." She exhaled slowly. Then what am I in this situation? Victor considered the question carefully before answering. You are someone whose safety altered the direction of an existing conflict. That sounds complicated. It is. She allowed a brief pause. You burned the debt record. Yes. You removed the transaction. Yes. Then why do they still see value in me? Victor's voice lowered slightly. Because influence is often interpreted as attachment. Nina understood the implication. They believe you care. Yes. And caring creates risk. Yes. She turned her gaze toward the darkened city streets passing beyond the window. Marcus used to say caring made people weak. Marcus misunderstood weakness, Victor replied. The car turned toward the quieter residential district where the penthouse building stood. Streetlights cast long reflections across wet pavement, suggesting recent rainfall. Nina spoke again. I pushed you to the left before the shot, she said. Yes. I didn't think. I reacted. Correct. She looked down briefly. I would do it again. Victor did not respond immediately. When he spoke, his tone remained calm but carried subtle emphasis. I am aware. The vehicle slowed as it entered the secured underground garage of the building. When the engine stopped, neither of them moved immediately. I don't want to live the rest of my life waiting for danger, Nina said quietly. Then you will not. That sounds optimistic. It is practical. She studied his expression. You believe conflict ends cleanly. No, Victor said. Conflict ends decisively. The distinction settled heavily in her thoughts. As they stepped out of the car, Nina noticed additional security presence within the garage, subtle but unmistakable. Preparation had already begun. Inside the elevator, silence returned. You are not obligated to remain involved, Victor said. That stopped being true the moment someone aimed a rifle at your chest while I was standing beside you, she replied calmly. Victor did not argue. I do not retreat easily, Nina added. That is becoming evident. The elevator doors opened onto the quiet penthouse floor. The familiar, calm interior contrasted sharply with the memory of shattered glass and echoed gunfire. Nina paused near the window, looking out across the vast city stretching beneath the night sky. Fear taught me how to endure, she said quietly. Victor removed his jacket, placing it carefully over the back of the chair. And what is fear teaching you now? He asked. Nina considered the question carefully before answering. That survival is no longer the objective. Victor nodded slightly. Correct. She met his gaze steadily. Now the objective is resolution. For the first time since the gunshot echoed through the gala hall, the faintest trace of approval appeared in Victor's expression. Outside, Chicago continued its quiet rhythm, unaware that the conflict unfolding high above its streets was moving steadily toward a conclusion that would not remain quiet for long. Night settled heavily over the industrial edge of Chicago, where the glow of downtown faded into long stretches of warehouses, rail lines, and silent shipping yards. The air carried the scent of lake water mixed with oil and rusted metal, a quieter world far removed from the polished marble floors of the gala. Nina sat in the back seat of Victor's vehicle, as the cityscape gradually transformed into something more exposed, more honest. This is not your residence, she observed quietly, as the car turned toward a fenced loading zone surrounded by stacked shipping containers. No, Victor replied. It is a controlled environment. The vehicle slowed as security gates opened with mechanical precision. Dim floodlights illuminated rows of steel containers arranged like an industrial maze. A second vehicle was already waiting near a modified structure that appeared to have been converted into a temporary operations space. Nina stepped out carefully, the cold air sharp against her lungs. This feels different, she said. It is, Victor answered. Inside the container structure, the atmosphere was functional rather than elegant. A steel table held several open laptops, printed diagrams, and communication devices. Two men stood as Victor entered, their posture straightening immediately. Report, Victor said calmly. Crimson Lotus representatives have moved toward consolidation points along the dock district, one of the men said. Their objective appears to be intimidation rather than immediate confrontation. They failed to intimidate, Victor replied. Yes. Nina remained silent, absorbing the shift in tone around her. The environment lacked luxury but radiated precision. Everyone present moved with quiet efficiency, speaking only when necessary. Victor turned toward her. You should remain here, he said. She crossed her arms lightly. I am already here. That does not require continued exposure to risk. Risk already introduced itself tonight, she replied calmly. Victor studied her expression briefly before nodding once. As you prefer. A map of the dockyard appeared on one of the laptop screens, highlighting traffic routes and shipping schedules. They expected you to retreat after the gala, Nina said. Yes, but instead, you moved closer to their operational territory. Yes. She looked at the layout carefully. You are demonstrating that their attempt to create fear had the opposite effect. Victor allowed a faint hint of approval. Correct. A low vibration echoed faintly through the metal structure as machinery somewhere in the distance continued its overnight work. Marcus was only a small part of their system, Nina said quietly. Yes. They used him because he was predictable. Yes. He owed money he could never repay. Yes. And they expected to use me as leverage. Yes. Nina looked at the map again. They assume I remain leverage. Victor's voice remained steady. They assume incorrectly. She considered the positioning of containers stacked in long corridors. Where would they try to regain advantage? She asked. Victor observed her closely. They would seek a controlled confrontation point. Somewhere with limited exits, Nina added. Yes. Her eyes moved to the container stacks near the eastern loading cranes. There, she said. Victor followed her line of sight. That location offers elevation and obstruction, she continued. It allows surveillance while restricting movement. Victor nodded slightly. You see patterns quickly. I learned by necessity. One of the security men approached quietly. Movement detected near Pier 14, he said. Victor turned calmly. Prepare containment perimeter. Nina's pulse quickened, though she kept her voice steady. They want you to appear reactive, she said. They will not succeed. You intend to control the engagement. Yes. Minutes later, the distant sound of footsteps echoed faintly between the metal structures outside. The night air seemed to grow colder. Victor handed Nina a small communication earpiece. You will remain inside, he instructed. I can observe from elevation, she replied, pointing toward the crane ladder visible through the open bay entrance. Victor paused briefly. That position increases risk. It increases visibility. Their eyes met. You will not intervene, he said. I will observe. Victor considered the decision for one moment before nodding. Nina climbed the narrow steel ladder slowly, each step deliberate. The crane operator's cabin provided a wide view of the container yard below. From this height, patterns became clearer. Movement revealed intention. 3 figures moved cautiously between stacks of containers, attempting to remain concealed. They believed themselves unnoticed. Victor stepped into the open space below, calm, visible, unhurried. The message was unmistakable. I am not hiding. The tension in the air thickened. One of the approaching figures moved slightly to the side, attempting to gain position behind stacked cargo. Nina noticed the shift immediately. He is repositioning, she said quietly into the earpiece. I see him, Victor replied. Another figure appeared from the opposite direction. Encirclement. They want crossfire positioning, Nina added. Victor adjusted his stance slightly, altering the angle of engagement. A 4th man moved quietly behind a stack of wooden pallets, raising a weapon. Nina's pulse surged. He is behind you, she said urgently. Victor shifted instantly, stepping into a position that removed the clear line of sight. The man fired prematurely, the shot echoing sharply through the yard. Victor moved with controlled speed, closing distance before hesitation could return. The confrontation lasted seconds rather than minutes. When silence returned, the night seemed larger. Nina descended the ladder slowly, her heartbeat still elevated but her mind clear. Victor stood near the fallen weapon, his expression unchanged. You remained, he said. Yes. You understood the risk. Yes. She met his gaze steadily. You stepped into the open knowing they would come. Yes. And you trusted I would recognize what they were doing. Yes. Nina folded her arms lightly. You could have ordered me to stay away. Yes. But you didn't. Victor's voice remained calm. Trust is demonstrated through responsibility. The weight of the moment settled quietly between them. One of the security men approached. The remaining Crimson Lotus contacts have withdrawn, he reported. Victor nodded once. Send confirmation that negotiations are concluded. Nina glanced toward the dark horizon where the lake met the night sky. Conflict rarely ends loudly, she said softly. No, Victor agreed. It ends decisively. She considered the events carefully. For years I believed survival required silence, she said. And now? Now I understand silence is only useful when chosen. Victor studied her expression with quiet recognition. The dockyard lights reflected faintly across the water beyond the stacked containers, the steady rhythm of waves brushing against steel and stone. Nina inhaled slowly, the cold air sharp but clarifying. Fear had not disappeared, but fear no longer dictated direction. And direction, she realized, was the foundation of power she had never allowed herself to imagine. Dawn rose slowly over Chicago, painting the horizon in muted shades of gold and pale amber. The first light of morning stretched across the surface of Lake Michigan, turning the dark water into shifting ribbons of reflected sky. Nina stood near the wide glass window of Victor Hale's penthouse, the city spread beneath her in quiet motion. Traffic had begun its early rhythm, headlights threading through streets that only hours earlier had witnessed tension and confrontation hidden from public view. The night at the docks had ended without spectacle, without headlines, without the dramatic collapse of buildings or the loud declarations often imagined in stories about power. Instead, the conflict had closed in the same manner it had escalated through deliberate decisions made by people accustomed to consequences. Victor entered the room carrying 2 cups of coffee. He placed one on the table beside her without comment. The simple routine felt strangely grounding after the intensity of the previous evening. "You did not sleep," he observed. "Not much," Nina admitted. "Adrenaline delays rest." She nodded slightly. "I kept replaying everything," she said. "The gala, the shot, the docks. I expected to feel relief now that it's over." "It is not fully over," Victor replied calmly. She looked toward him. "But the direction is clear." "Yes." She wrapped her hands lightly around the warm cup. "For years I thought danger always came from raised voices," she said quietly. "I never imagined it could arrive dressed in tailored suits and polite conversation." Victor allowed a faint pause. Danger often prefers environments where no one expects it. Nina considered the truth of that statement. "What happens to the people who tried to use Marcus?" she asked. "They reconsider future decisions," Victor said. "That sounds diplomatic." "It is practical." She studied his expression carefully. "You didn't pursue them beyond the docks." "No." "Why?" "Conflict escalates when humiliation replaces resolution." She absorbed the distinction. "You chose restraint. I chose conclusion." Nina nodded slowly. The silence between them felt different now. Less uncertain. More reflective. "I used to believe power meant never feeling afraid," she said. Victor sat across from her. "Fear is information," he replied. "And what does that information say now?" "That your instincts are improving." She allowed a small breath of quiet amusement. "That sounds like cautious praise." "It is accurate praise." Nina looked out over the skyline again. "I don't want to return to the life I had before," she admitted. "You will not. I also don't want to lose who I was before everything became about survival." Victor considered her words carefully. "Identity adapts," he said. "It does not disappear." She hesitated. "I spent years believing my value depended on someone else's approval. That belief was incorrect. I know that now," she said quietly. "But knowing something and living as if it is true are different things." "Yes." She turned toward him fully. "I want a life where I am not hidden, not controlled, and not used as leverage." "You will have that," Victor said. "I want independence. You will have that as well." She studied his face carefully. "You speak as though everything has already been decided." "Decisions become outcomes when supported by action." She nodded slowly. "I am not afraid of responsibility," she said. "That is evident. I am afraid of losing myself." Victor leaned slightly forward. "People who fear losing themselves rarely do," he said. The reassurance felt measured, not exaggerated. Nina reached toward the small velvet box resting on the table. She had noticed it when she entered the room but had not yet asked about it. Victor followed her gaze. "That is for you," he said. She opened the box slowly. Inside rested a heavy gold signet ring set with a dark onyx stone. The engraved crest depicted a stylized falcon, wings extended in controlled motion. "This is not jewelry," she said quietly. "No. It represents authority." "Yes. I have not earned authority in your world." Victor's tone remained steady. "You earned trust. That is different. Trust creates authority." She studied the ring carefully. "I don't want symbolic protection," she said. "It is not symbolic." "What is it?" "It is recognition." She hesitated. "Of what?" "Of the fact that you are no longer reacting to fear," Victor said calmly. "You are acting with clarity." Nina lifted the ring gently from the box. "I don't want to become dependent on power." "Then do not become dependent," Victor replied. Use it responsibly. She considered the weight of the object in her palm. For years I believed dignity was something other people decided for me, she said quietly. Victor did not interrupt. I understand now that dignity is maintained through choice. Yes, she met his Gaza. If I accept this, I do so as an equal participant in my own future. That is the only acceptable condition, Victor replied. Nina slid the ring onto her finger slowly. The metal felt solid, grounded, real, not decorative, intentional. Outside the window, morning sunlight illuminated the city in soft gold. Chicago continued its rhythm, unaware that within the quiet penthouse overlooking the skyline, a woman who had once hidden in the back seat of a stranger's car now stood with the steady awareness that her life no longer belonged to fear. Victor stood beside her, not closer than necessary, not distant enough to suggest indifference. I told you I would protect you, he said quietly. Nina allowed herself a small, calm breath. And I told you I would not run, she replied. The reflection in the window showed two figures standing side by side, neither overshadowing the other. Power, she realized, did not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it arrived quietly, built through decisions no one else witnessed. Sometimes justice did not demand recognition. Sometimes dignity returned without asking permission. She had entered the car believing she was escaping danger. She now understood she had been moving towards something far more difficult, responsibility, and for the first time in many years, responsibility did not feel like a burden. It felt like freedom. This story reminds us that dignity is not granted by wealth, status, or the approval of others. It is reclaimed the moment a person decides they are no longer willing to live in fear. True protection does not imprison, it empowers. True love does not control, it respects. And true justice is often quiet, unfolding through courage, loyalty, and the willingness to stand firm when it would be easier to run. The journey from survival to self-respect is never easy, but the moment we choose our own worth, the balance of power begins to change. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.